When the Advance put out a call for a Gen Z roundtable, 6 Wagner College students answered. In a conference room on the last campus on the Hill, each student offered their perspective on topics like mass shootings, abortion, and the presidential nominees. With a country ready to be molded at their fingertips, this is what they had to say.
Hi, I'm Jill the Lady, and I am helming the project at the Advance Gen Z 2024 election 2024 Gen Z may hold the key, trying to get more youth voters' voices into the media. Just because it seems that we hear a lot of stuff online, and it doesn't necessarily pertain to our demographic. I guess we'll go down the line. Please introduce yourself: name, age, year, major.
Okay, I'm Jarrell Liverpool, 19, finance major, he/him.
My name is Nicolette Arpaio. I'm 19 years old. I am a sociology major, and I'm minoring in pre-law, and she/her are my pronouns.
Hi, I'm Jules Donahue. I'm 19 years old. I'm a theater performance major, and I use she/her pronouns.
My name is Lily McNally. I'm 20 years old. I'm a junior here at Wagner. I'm a sociology major, civic engagement minor, and I use she/her pronouns.
Hi, I'm Catherine Graham. I'm 18 years old, and I'm a double major in theater performance and dance education, and my pronouns are she/her.
Hi, I'm A.G. Carhart. I use they, them pronouns. I'm 21 years old. I'm a senior and a sociology with a focus on social work major, and a civic engagement minor, and a music minor.
I assume everyone here is registered to vote? Yeah?
Yes.
Awesome. Is this also all your first time voting?
Yes.
Great. Who are you planning to vote for in November?
I'd say I'm planning to vote for Kamala Harris.
To be completely honest, I'm still kind of weighing my options, but I'm definitely leaning towards Kamala Harris because I'm registered as an independent, so I just like to see all the pros and cons before I actually vote.
I'm also technically registered as an independent, but I tend to lean liberal and Democrats, so Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
I'm voting for Harris.
Kamala Harris.
Voting for Harris.
And if you had one word to describe how you're feeling about this presidential election, what could it be?
I'd say I'm excited. Well, number one, because it's my first, and I feel like it's time for a change. I feel like there's been a long time where women weren't in power, and I feel like now is the time to change. Women are as qualified as men to be the president. So
It's definitely time for a change. I think that women empowerment is something that we've always leaned towards, obviously. I would also say I'm a little bit nervous just to see how it goes. Just because I know that there are a lot of things that need to be changed in this country in general, in the world in general. And I just think that this could really change things as long as we all stick together and make strong decisions.
I'm feeling hopeful about the election, also nervous as well, because obviously I want it to turn out with who I'm voting for. But also I think this is a turning point in America as far as politics goes, just in general, regardless of who wins.
If I'm being honest, I would say nervous because I just feel like a lot of it is obviously out of my hands, and we can't expect to know what's going to happen. But I'm curbing that anxiety by staying civically engaged leading up to the election.
I'm really excited, but I'm also really nervous because I know either way, I feel like there's a lot of political division, and so I'm nervous to see how that will work out, but I'm really excited to be able to vote for the first time.
Similar to Lily, I'm low-key scared. I fear my rights with this election. I fear women's rights. I fear a lot of things to go down in history, whether whoever becomes our president.
How do you think your preferred candidate will help Gen Zers in the next 4 years?
I'd say the major thing is giving Gen Zers an option. Kamala's ad, she talked about there was the woman in the video. She was around, I think she had gotten raped when she was around 14. I don't know all the facts, but basically the story was she got raped at a young age, and being in that situation, Gen Zers 18, 19, as they age, I feel like they should definitely have the choice to decide whether they want to keep a baby in their life or get rid of it. I feel like it shouldn't be put upon you to bring something in this world that you're not ready for. So I feel like Gen Zers should have the choice to, make that decision because it's an important decision. So,
I definitely think that the candidate that I'm voting for, Kamala Harris, is going to focus and bring attention to 3 really important things for Gen Z, which is abortion, because obviously reproductive age spans kind of a wide bracket, but in the coming years, that's definitely going to affect Gen Z. And I think women should have the right to make choices about their own body. I also think education, student loan debt forgiveness, I know that that's something that the Biden administration has brought attention to, and I want that to keep going because that's definitely going to affect Gen Z because we're students, most of us, right now. And also just the rights of LGBTQIA plus people. They exist in every generation, but especially going forward to have the talk of maybe like the right to gay marriage being taken away after it was already instated that you were able to marry someone of a different sex. Just taking away those rights that have already been established and also further impeding progress on that is going to affect the younger generations more so than the older generations.
I think that the abortion rights and the LGBTQIA community, I think that just goes to show the fact that these are looking to be not overturned, but are like being like somewhat ignored, like women and the LGBTQIA community as well. I think that it just goes to show that even us as a nation and as just people in general, our independence and our freedom is being taken away. Like those are rights. Women should have the right to make their own decisions. People in general should have the right to make their own decisions. I personally believe it doesn't matter who you love, who you are, the type of person you are. I think that we're human beings. All our blood is the same. We're people. That's it. That's all it comes down to. And I think that just goes to show that, like, Gen Z in general, I think we all need to kind of band together and show that we have power as well. We're all human beings. We should all be, like, working together for our own rights. Whether you're a different race, a different religion, a different ethnicity, it shouldn't matter.
I have anxiety about finances in terms of my student loans, in terms of how the economy is going to look. And I think that the Harris administration gives me more security in the fact that I could find stability post-graduation. And as my peers have said, I also fear my safety if Harris isn't elected. I fear the safety of underprivileged individuals and communities as well.
For me, the 2 main things that come to mind are reproductive health as well. And I think just having a woman who can advocate for issues that have been really honestly ignored for so long is really important. And then also gun control, because I feel like enough is enough at this point, and people shouldn't have to be scared going to school, and that's been a big issue for all of Gen Z.
So I think that Harris and Wallace's ideas and plan to go forward is, in my opinion, better than the other candidates, because one, the other candidate does not have female reproductive organs and doesn't know what it's like to carry a fetus and to then give birth and go through that. And so I think that rights shouldn't be determined by somebody who can't go through that. And then I fear that due to Roe v. Wade being overturned and now it's up to all the states, I fear, and currently right now, it is a fear for women and people who can carry. And I don't want that to be a reoccurring issue as it is currently. And then, of course, people of color as well. One of our candidates talks very poorly upon other people than white. And also people in the LGBTQIA plus community, like myself, trans rights are being ripped away from people. There's students in high schools and colleges who do not have access to healthcare because they're trans and are turned away because they're trans. And that's even on regular checkups. They're like, we can't help you here because you're trans. And I don't think that's fair. And these states shouldn't have that authority to do that. I'm also in fear of gay rights and marriage, as people are turning away folks who just don't abide by the norms. And then also gun control in schools. There's way too many school shootings. And while Harris has talked about how her and Walz are gun owners, I think she has better ideology than Trump. So,
On that topic, how often do you worry about something like a school shooting or a mass shooting happening near you or around you? Is that something that you fear?
I mean, living in a high populated area, it's definitely something to fear. There's something happening every single day with a gun and where we live. Some people don't even realize that, but it's true, and it is something to fear. I mean, not to fear everybody, but like, I do have that feeling sometimes.
In terms of how often I think about it, I would probably say every day. In New York City, I'm thinking about it. When I get on the subway, I'm thinking about it. When, like, for example, today, a family member of mine was attending a Walz rally in Pennsylvania, and I have been anxious all day about what could have possibly happened, and thank God nothing happened, but it was just something that was on my mind all day, and I wish it wasn't.
Being raised in Staten Island, New York City, we live very close to Manhattan, and not only is this a constant fear, like you said, like on the subways, I think it's just a fear for safety in general. I think that school shootings are something that were very reoccurring for the high school that I went to. There were either threats, we had lockdowns. There were 2 times that it actually did happen. It occurred outside of the school. And then the schools around, all the other public schools, the Catholic schools, the private schools, everybody has to shut down. Me personally, I have 4 other siblings. I have an older brother, a younger brother, and 2 younger sisters. My youngest sister is 9 years old. I'm 10 years older than her. And she was scared to go to school because she heard about it. And my other younger sister as well is 13, so she kind of understood a little bit more what that meant when we would have a lockdown. As opposed to my youngest sister, my parents could kind of, speak to her in a different way. But my 13-year-old sister, she more so understood what that meant for us to have to lock down. And she also was fearing for her life. I don't think that in an elementary school or a middle school, you should have to fear for your life. I think that that's disgusting. I think that that's upsetting. And I think that that's not the world that we should live in, but unfortunately it is. And yeah, I think that was just something that actually makes me really upset. It makes me really frustrated because they shouldn't have to fear for things like that.
I definitely worry about it every day, and especially in high school. Like, I had a lot of anxiety around that topic and just always feeling like I can never be truly at ease because it's always thinking about where would I exit this room if I had to? Where would I hide? Would I be okay? And then when lockdowns would happen, when things were happening in the area, there's no way to describe really how terrifying it is to hide in a closet with your friends and not know what's happening. And I think it's honestly just ridiculous at this point that change hasn't been made and that people aren't taking it more seriously.
Ever since I was in high school, even elementary, right? Growing up, seeing Sandy Hook, seeing Parkland, all these school shootings, it's like, when is it going to be a change? We've been talking about change for how long now? We protest. I remember I think I was in middle school when there was like a walkout for the Parkland shooting, and I participated in that. And it's like younger students were showing interest, like we want change, but there just hasn't been any change. And when is it going to be time to stand up and say, okay, enough of this? Because this only happens in the United States. So it's like something just has to be done about it.
When Lily said something that she fears every day, I definitely like every day or every other day, something that I think about, something you see on social media or the news. And I think like especially today, since we're so oversaturated with media, like you kind of can't run away from it, but yet at the same time, I feel like our government is running away from it. I think people think that liberal and democratic people want to take away all guns. I personally would never own a gun. Like that's just not something I'm interested in. But I don't think people realize it's not about taking away all guns. It's making sure that the legislation and how to get a gun is more strict so that these young people who are, the general population and typical kind of profile of a shooter, like a mass shooter or a school shooter, they're not getting access to it. And also to ban assault rifles. Because if you want a gun, or like if people want a gun in their house, maybe if somebody like breaks in, why do you need like an AR-15? Like you can't have a more, I don't know, calm gun. Like it's just the prominence of assault rifles in America is unlike any other country, and it really bothers me, makes me scared. And I just think it doesn't mean we have to eradicate all gun usage, even though that's not something that I would ever like subscribe to personally. It just means that we need to make it more strict and more safe for our children and also just for everyone in general.
And following that vein, what would you like to be done, if anything, to stop these tragic events?
I personally have never thought about owning a gun because it's not something that was ever on my mind, especially as a young girl. But seeing everything that's been going on, I think that 100% we need stricter rules on how you can attain a gun. I actually saw a video on YouTube, and it was a social experiment, and a 14-year-old child went into a store to buy cigarettes and alcohol, and he gave his ID, and they turned him down. He wasn't allowed to have cigarettes or alcohol. He walked into a store to purchase a gun, and they gave him the gun. I think that to me is absolutely insane. Again, I think that that's disturbing. I think that that's scary. So I definitely think that there needs to be more mental check backgrounds on people who are purchasing guns. And I think that redundant, but what you said, there just needs to be stricter rules.
To go off of what she said, I think that some issues can remain like up to the jurisdiction of the state. Gun control, that should be just like countrywide is what I'm trying to say. I think that it's like a national assault rifle ban has been talked about. I'm definitely not opposed to that idea. I just think there are some things that the states can do on their own and other things that should be uniform in our country. And if we're going to better gun laws, make them more strict, that should be something that's uniform throughout the whole country.
Kind of a little bit contrary to some of the beliefs. I wrote a essay in high school about this. It was titled Abolish Guns. I don't believe that guns should be here. They were originally here for war, to kill. And that's ultimately what a bullet does. Once it hits a person, a thing, whatever it is, it deletes it. So I am not for guns at all whatsoever. Sadly, it's impossible to get rid of them. There's always going to be the black market. There's always going to be, I think they call them like dead guns or something like that. Or ghost guns. But I genuinely don't think that there's a need for guns I don't even think police should have guns, because why are you going in to de-escalate something with a gun? Like, that makes no sense whatsoever. And all these police brutalities, like, all result because they used a gun for what? Like, I don't know. Anyways, I don't agree with guns.
Do you feel what's important to you is different from what's important to older generations? And if so, what is it?
I'd say one of the things that I think is important that may not be important to older generations is climate change. I feel like older people, you know, their time on, let's be honest, like their time on this earth is short. We're the ones that's going to have to deal with the effects of the climate change. Like the hurricane that just passed, Hurricane Helene, like it did so much devastation. And these storms are only going to get stronger and stronger. Coastal cities such as New York, even the city we're in, Florida, waters are going to start, coming inland because of the climate change, the global warming, the fossil fuels in the air. So I feel like we need a candidate or a president that's going to actually believe in climate change, because I know that the opposite party doesn't really believe in climate change. So we need a president that's going to believe in climate change and actually take actions to stop climate change and diminish the effects.
The older generation is diverse in that they don't all believe the same thing, but I do think that in terms of things like adding more social programs, a lot of times the older generation has more of the mindset of, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do it yourself. Whereas I feel like it's really important with things like healthcare and helping the homeless. I think that more social programs would be better. And I think the newer generation cares more about like building more community resources.
I think that because of the way that the older generation was kind of raised and the people that they are being led by has a very big impact on their mindset, obviously. I think that climate change is definitely one thing that they 100% just overlook. Because like you said, it's not something they're going to have to deal with. Because although it is a slow moving destruction, it's still going to be a huge problem. I think that something else that the older generation might have a different opinion on is the LGBTQIA rights. I think that, like I said, older people, it's not something they're going to have to deal with. And it's kind of something that was ignored when they were younger. And so it's not as important to them. I think that it was pushed to the side. But obviously, our generation, we want that freedom. We want the ability to be able to be ourselves. And I think that was kind of something that was, in a way, taken away from the older generation, was them being allowed to express themselves and be themselves. But it's also because that mindset was forced upon them, in my opinion. And then one other thing I wanted to mention was I am in a sociology class right now. I believe that immigration is something that the older generations think very negatively of. I think that it's something that they have a really harsh mindset of people who are migrated into this country. And I think that has to change. We're said to be a melting pot of different people. It's also said that we're I know New York in general, because I kind of have a New York mindset. I'm accepting of all people. But I know a lot of people aren't that way, and I think that that's a big majority of the older population think that way as well.
Another thing that I think the older generation probably isn't as worried about is education, specifically the content of what kids are learning in school, kids and also just like young adults. There's a trend among the Republican Party, the way they are right now, to ban books and ban certain types of media. Obviously, I don't think little kids should be reading all about like sex or violence, but I am of the belief that I was raised kind of to be mature. I was always a little bit more mature than my peers as far as awareness goes, and just truth-telling, I guess, that I was raised with parents that were very open about things. They wouldn't try to sugarcoat much for me. And I just think that kids are going to learn the truth eventually. Like, if you're banning a book because it has a gay person in it, they're going to come across a gay person in their life, and that's whether or not you take away their rights. You can't change somebody's sexual orientation. So it's like you're banning this because you want to kind of shelter them, and you think that it's not okay for them to know about these certain populations or these ideas, but it's like someday they are going to have to face it. So not showing the truth and kind of doing that on a mass level is something that's really, really destructive to the younger generations, Gen Z and younger than us, and also a little bit older than us, their parents. It's like you're kind of telling parents how to raise their children by clouding your kids' judgment with different ideas that aren't necessarily the truth. So that's another point that I think should be raised.
I feel like even growing up in a small town upstate, I feel like my parents weren't as susceptible to information that I have learned. And through my transition as a queer person, I feel like to them it was harder almost because they made it seem like it. And I think through my experience as a Gen Zer, like, I definitely am more susceptible to change and an outlook that might not be as susceptible to them. For example, like LGBTQ issues might not be as easy to the older generations because they weren't experienced. They didn't have that experience. They were told that's not okay or slapped on the wrist for saying the word gay. And also with immigrants in this country, I feel like the older generation are so quick to say, like, bring them back or, like, tell them to go home or build a wall. Like, that language is so old. And, like, I feel like us Gen Zers see that and we're like, let's welcome people. Like, they're clearly here for a reason. Most of them are here for, to seek asylum because where they're from is not safe for them. And for older generations to sort of to not challenge that is upsetting. And so I think, like, us as Gen Zers, we're more inclined to be like, no, like, you need to rethink your thoughts and relearn some things. And the saying of, like, you can't train an old dog, or you can't train an old dog with treats or something like that, like, I strongly don't believe that, because my mom is very accepting of me now, and as she grows older, like, she's been more inclusive and a very proud mom, and because of that, I can also, like, when I talk to her about very progressive issues like immigrants and the LGBTQ issues and other things in society, women's rights and abortion access, she's very receptive to it. And I think because she experiences it with me and some of my other siblings, she is more receptive. And the sad part is there's not everybody has a child who's gay, or not everybody has a child who's Black, and not everybody has a child who needed an abortion. So until it happens to people is when you see change. But then if it doesn't happen to somebody, they're, I think, less receptive to it.
While I do think that some of the things that I am passionate about and want to see change in society, that those things might be different than an older generation, I don't think that we should set our generation against any other generation, because that is not producing change or creating progress in any way. I think that what needs to happen is the availability to have meaningful conversations that are intergenerational, and I think it's when we hear voices from different opinions and different people and different experiences and walks of life, that's when we really understand what issues are impactful to us. So while inherently maybe some of my interests are different than a general older population, I don't think we can say everyone over the age of 50, for example, has a different opinion than me. I've had very meaningful conversations with older generations, and I'm open-minded, and I can only hope that this opposite group that we're talking about is also open-minded.
Former President Donald Trump and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance have been claiming that Haitian migrants are eating pets and wildfowl in Springfield, Ohio. There's no concrete evidence that this is happening. Do you think it's all right for any presidential candidate to tout falsehoods or misleading information?
To answer the question, absolutely not. I think that to say such thing is very childish. For a person to be a former president and to have that power and to say that over the people in his country is absurd. Because he's supposed to protect us, and that's not something you would say about your people. So yeah, simple answer, no.
I think it's really embarrassing as a country to have a former president that would say something like that, because, I mean, even elementary schoolers know that that kind of stuff is not true. And so someone holding the highest office in the land has no excuse for not knowing that that's not true. And I don't know, I think it's just another reminder that, like, we need to move away from that and move forward with actual change and someone with experience.
I think that it's very destructive for them to be spreading false information, but also gearing off like your specific example, I think that it's very hard to trust what anyone is going to say, especially if the leader of our country is spreading false information. And I think that if you add that to social media, because that's a very big thing that is part of Gen Z and how we are, I think that if you add false information from our leader and then also just people in general spreading false information on social media, it's very hard to trust anything. And so it's very hard to find real information, and it's very hard to know it's real. And I think that that's having a very bad impact on the way that everyone expresses themselves and sees certain things, because you don't know what's true and what's not. And I think that that's a very dangerous situation for all of us to be in. And I think that it's much harder for us to all connect on a genuine, trusting level. And I think it's harder for us to connect with the leader of our country if we can't even trust the things that they're saying.
Politicians and politics in general have a reputation for being misleading sometimes with information and spouting certain falsehoods. I think that Donald Trump is probably the most extreme version of that we've seen in American politics, or the most bombastic version of it. I don't appreciate that. I think it's ridiculous. But I would like to acknowledge that I do think any politician has probably spouted a falsehood or two in their life. It's just the content of what he's saying, the way he's saying it is probably the most extreme we've ever seen. And that is just not appropriate in my book for a former president or a presidential candidate.
I feel like, politicians, they hold a lot of power. And especially with social media, all these things get spread. And the followers of these politicians, they go on their Instagrams, their social medias, and they spread this message to their people. So it's like, I feel like exactly in this case, Donald Trump, he knows like the power he has, especially he knows from the January 6th incident. So it's like spreading these lies about, for in this instance, Haitians, it's not right at all, because now people will go and retaliate or discriminate Haitians. And me, myself, I know some people that are Haitian. So like they'll get discriminated and they'll get hate for no reason. It's like, what for? Or because of a lie spread by a political leader. So it's not right at all.
With power comes responsibility. That's a well-known saying. I think that is very true. I think that with the power and the responsibility that the leader of our nation has, you're using that to manipulate people. You're using that to lose the trust of your people who you're supposed to be protecting. And I think that taking advantage of a situation like that, like being in a position of power like that, is disgraceful. I think that that's probably just one of the worst things you can do. I think that you're here to lead, you're here to protect the rights of your people, and you're taking advantage of that situation and being manipulative.
Building off the social media aspect of it, like you said, social media is a huge part of Gen Z and younger generations. Does a candidate being a social media sensation make you more or less likely to vote for them?
The whole idea of being a sensation on social media definitely impacts who they're voting for. I mean, I know like Kamala Harris's campaign really took the brat stuff and ran with it. But I also know that Donald Trump, maybe unintentionally, has been made into a popular meme a time or two. So I think that definitely affects the opinion of Gen Z on the whole, just because we're so saturated with it and we're kind of the first generation to really have that throughout our whole lives, to have the presence of social media throughout our whole lives. And we're seeing it progress, we're seeing it advance, we're part of it. And I think Gen Z also has the tendency to spread that information more, like they're more active on social media, they understand it better, they're more accustomed to it. So they are definitely going to take that into account on the whole, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just, I think, how we function.
So I think that, well, more recently, some celebrities have come out and endorsed one of the candidates, and I think that that's important. Some people think it's not important, but I think endorsements are very important, especially for an election like this, where a lot of rights are on the line, and whether we go forward or move backward is on the line. And I think that having these very popular people come out and endorse the Democratic Party is important to get voters out there in that community to go out and vote, which for specifically Taylor Swift, there's a lot of Gen Z involved with supporting Taylor. So I think that with all of the things that she has said about Harris's party, I think it gives me more hope in this election. So I think that that's as much as it's like, it's kind of difficult because I'm like, I don't really like, I like Taylor Swift's music, but like I'm not big on her climate issues that she causes. But like the fact that there's all these people who follow her, the Swifties and everything, I think it's important that those folks learn from her to go out and vote if that's who they listen to. If that's who that they trust so much, then I would hope that they trust her enough to vote for the person that she's also going to vote for. Because, again, it's our rights, and we deserve our rights. So,
for me personally, like having a social media presence doesn't sway me one way or another because I just go based off of policy. However, I do think that for my generation as a whole, it's a really powerful marketing tool. And I think even just showing that a politician is working to reach out to a certain demographic like Gen Z and show up and try to reach out to them and show that they do care about their issues, I think that that is really powerful. And I do think that a lot of people in my generation do get their news from a lot of social media sites. So I do think that it does sway a lot of people, but for me personally, it doesn't.
I think that political candidates being on social media is kind of a little bit of a dangerous situation. Because like we were talking about before, I think that falsehoods could be spread that way. I also think that one of our presidential candidates being a meme is childish and ridiculous and kind of embarrassing for like us as a country. I would also like to go back to AG's point about celebrity endorsements on their political views. I think that that can be very impactful in a positive and a negative way. I agree with what you were saying about how putting voting out there and making sure that you have the power. You have the power to do that. Like we were talking about before, power with responsibility. I think that if you have that power to tell people, go out, go vote, go make an impact, go share your opinions, I think that that's something that could be used in a really good way. But I also think that you have to be a little conscious and careful, just because maybe certain Swifties, like the example you used, maybe certain people disagree with some of her opinions, and I think that just, I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think you also just have to have an open mind and be able to separate the celebrity from the person. I mean, Taylor Swift is a celebrity, but she's also a human being. And I think that you kind of have to have your own opinions as well. But I do think that if celebrities understood the power and responsibility that they had, they could realize, like, you can push people to go out and vote, because no matter who you're voting for, no matter what you're doing, no matter what your personal opinions are, I think that it's important that you push yourself to be able to make your impact, whatever that may be.
Okay. So, for you, college-age Gen Zer, what does the economy look like?
Expensive.
Horrid. Yeah.
I think it's very expensive. I'm gonna have student debt, and I don't want it. And after college, I'm gonna go to more college, and I'm gonna have more student debt. Like, I'm not excited. And right now, I guess I heard that inflation is decreasing, but I don't believe it. Because it's not showing in my paycheck. So, yeah, I don't think that it's just really expensive, and it's sad that we have to keep looking at money as a scapegoat, sort of, because we're always looking at, like, the prices of things, and when is it going to be on the cheapest price, or at the cheapest price, or when's the sale going to happen, or, like, when's the cheapest day to go to Costco to get gas. Like, yeah, that's all I'm going to say about the economy right now.
Something I want to say that I feel like is not talked about enough is obviously I think people in the Republican Party, but also people who are not in the Republican Party, are critical of how, like, the Biden administration has handled the economy. And I'll be honest, like, economy is not the first issue that I'm worried about, even though I know it is probably for a lot of people. Not because of my financial background, it's just I have other things like abortion and student loan debt, which I guess is economy, but abortion and also the rights of LGBTQIA plus people and women. Those are more important to me at the moment. Those are, like, my key issues. But the economy is going to be affected by the fact that we had a global pandemic that it literally rocked not just our country, but the entire world. And I don't think people take that into account enough, because even though Donald Trump was, in office when the pandemic came, people who support him are going to say that the economy and the handling of the pandemic after he left, kind of fell through, and it wasn't as good because people who support his economic policies are going to believe that he was the one who kind of held it up. And then when Joe Biden came in, it all crashed down and inflation rose and everything like that. But I don't think there is... I mean, I'm sure there could have been other things done, but I don't think there's so much that could be done to reverse the economic effect, or the effect on the economy that a global pandemic, like something so traumatic like that, could have. I mean, personally speaking, from, like, my family, I know during the pandemic, my mom, she's the owner of a private business. She had to shut down for months, and she's still, like, they're still financially and economically recovering from that. Like, that impact doesn't just go away in a year. So even though, Donald Trump was president when the pandemic was kind of at its height or at the start, and then Joe Biden came in, and maybe people might criticize, like, the post-pandemic economy, that's not something that can be fixed in, like, 4 years. And I don't think people talk about that enough. And it bothers me because I know that people are upset with the Biden-Harris economy and inflation. And I'm not saying that our economy is perfect. It never has been and probably never will be. But I just think people need to take that into account more because it's important.
I don't know that much about the economy, but I do know that like the current state of it causes a lot of stress, I feel like, for everybody. And just things that come to mind that I'm worried about is if I'll ever be able to own my own home or be able to live on my own. And I feel like those kinds of topics, I mean, they're affecting everyone equally. So I feel like that's an area where we can all come together and work towards improving. And I think that's also an issue that specifically affects Gen Z a lot because my parents were able to buy a house way, way sooner than I will ever be able to.
So I actually just saw on the news recently that this is how I actually know that I guess the inflation is going down. The housing market right now, the what is it called rate? The interest rates? Yeah. The interest rates to buy a house, the loans have gone down a little bit, but like I know a little bit in interest rates is a lot, but at the same time it's like for us Gen Zers it doesn't look like that because we've never experienced it. And I guess it's going down and they think it's going to go down by 2030, but I don't know. We'll see it when we see it. The other thought I had was on the economy, and when I do talk to people about politics and their beliefs, a lot of the times they're very persistent on Trump is better at the economy than any other politician. Like when Harris wasn't running and it was Biden, they said they weren't going to vote for Biden, one, because he's really old, and two, because he doesn't do well with the economy and Trump does better. And I was like, where's your proof? Because once Trump left the office after doing us what he did with COVID, not saying that COVID was his fault, but also like he could have communicated a little better, and had better allies. But anyways, people always go to the fact that Trump is better at the economy than anybody else, and I don't think that is true. Like maybe he's good with some types of numbers, but the only words that come out of his mouth are millions and billions. So I'm like, do you really believe that man? Because that's the only grammar that he chooses to use. But anyways, with the US right now, we're broke, like we're in debt, and I don't understand, like, cuz we're all in debt with everything in life. For us, student loans and maybe car payments and apartment bills, but our country's in debt. And so for us to be supporting other countries right now, and sending them military aid and bombs and ammunition is upsetting because we're also here in debt and our country is in debt. So where is all this money coming from? And then it's like I go back and I think, and I'm like, right, I pay taxes and all my taxes go to the military that is funding, I don't know if we're allowed to talk about this, but a genocide. And I find it really hard to keep going with this. Like, our country is just really painful sometimes, and it's hard to be in and hard to trust and hard to understand. So yeah.
I think that the federal minimum wage needs to be raised. I'm from Pennsylvania. Minimum wage is the federal rate of $7.25 an hour, and that is not a livable wage. Point blank.
So, abortion and reproductive rights are on the physical ballot in at least 8 states this November. And I know we've talked a little bit about this already, but where do you fall on the topic of abortion and reproductive rights?
I am scared because once Roe v. Wade was overturned, I immediately felt like my rights could be taken away. And I think that there are so many circumstances that abortion might need to be necessary. And I think that there's often some sort of misinformation that Democrats or anyone who supports a woman's right to choose just wants no one to be pregnant or wants to hand out abortions. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that when abortion is a necessary thing or something that a woman wants, I think that should be available.
I already talked about this, but I am of the belief that a woman should have choice over her body. I know a lot of times it comes down to be a religious issue. I am Roman Catholic, but I think we have to be realistic about these sorts of things, because people who use religion as evidence as to why, abortion is not okay and it's not right and it's murder, I think you have to be realistic, because once again, you have to acknowledge the truth in life. Even though there are abortion bans, people are still trying to get abortions. And it's not working most of the time in the states that have abortion bans. But I think you just have to be realistic about it, and realize that even though you might not fundamentally believe it yourself, if you got pregnant and you didn't want the child, but you would decide to keep it, because of maybe a religious belief, you have to realize that it's not your business for in regard to somebody else. I just think if I individually wanted to do that, that's okay for me, but it doesn't make it okay to control what somebody else might want to do. And then also, going off of what they said, it's especially important when the care is not really a choice, but it's something of a necessity, because a mom's life might be at stake, or the carrier's life might be at stake, or the life of the baby might be at stake. That is where I really, really believe that the abortion ban should be lifted, and it should be a countrywide thing, because it's just not okay to not only allow someone to not make their own choice and get in someone else's business, the phrase mind your own business. I definitely feel that way, but it's also about women literally having their lives be at stake and not be able to get life-saving care. And I just don't think that's okay, especially in a country that claims to be so free.
No matter what, abortions are going to happen, so it's really a matter of whether or not more or less women die as a result of it. And I think especially in cases of rape and incest, it needs to be available, because I think it's absolutely ludicrous to force a child who was raped to give birth to a baby. And we also have separation of church and state in this country, so I find it really confusing why this is still an ongoing thing where laws are being made based on religion. And even cases like IVF being banned, I'm honestly really confused why separation of church and state isn't being upheld.
First, I think it's fair to recognize that not only women can give birth. There's trans folks, there's non-binary, gender fluid, non-conforming folks who also carry children, and sometimes due to incest or rape, and don't have the choice to have an abortion. In some states, people are crossing state lines illegally to go get an abortion, and there are states who have laws saying they cannot do that. I think it is ridiculous that states have the authority to rule over the person's body. And it's not just about accessibility, it's also about safety and procedures being done properly. Even during Roe v. Wade, while it was still in place, there were unsafe abortions happening. And now, due to Roe v. Wade being taken away, there are more unsafe abortions happening and more people who can give birth dying. And I don't think that, the excuse that, oh, but the baby inside is more important than the person alive already, is crazy to me. And also, the 12-week thing. Honestly, if I could choose heck, have an abortion whenever, because it's the person's choice. It's the person who's ready or not. Yeah. I think that abortion should be accessible and free, if that, and it should be done whenever needed.
I think that overturning Roe v. Wade was one of the biggest mistakes that the people that are part of our government could have possibly made. I think that so many people, especially like what AG was saying, people who are biologically able to have children and people who go through transitions and are then able to have children, I think that we lost so much trust in our government. I think that safety, again, like what AJ was saying, I like fully agree with everything that you said. I think that being able to be safe is part of our government's responsibility. They're supposed to be the ones enforcing our freedom, enforcing our rights, and I think that having a choice over your own body is a right that is for every single human being should have. And I think that overturning that was a huge mistake.
I mentioned it earlier. I talked about the Kamala Harris ad where she talked about, she did the interview with the lady that was raped at a young age and basically was forced to keep the child. And like, she basically hated herself. She hated life. And I feel like that's not right. Nobody should go about their life hating themselves or feeling a type of way because they are forced to keep a baby, especially in that case, it was rape and incest. So it's like, you just have to live with that. Having to live with that in yourself, it should be a feeling that nobody ever deals with.
Back to something that we touched upon before. From your perspective, what is America's job in the war between Hamas and Israel and between Russia and Ukraine?
I think it's very ignorant for our country not to do anything. And for people who do think that our country should stay out of it, I disagree, and I challenge that, because as the U.S., we are supposed to help our allies, and apparently the only ally that matters is the one who gives us money, and in exchange, well, they give us oil or whatever, but like, we have other ways of getting oil. We have other ways of doing things as a country. And for, like, there must, like, when I think about it all, and like way back, like months ago, I was thinking about this and I was like, there must be something that we don't know. There must be something that the society doesn't know that the president knows for the president not to do anything about it. But then I'm like, that's such a white way of thinking. That is so, like, Americanized, and I'm, like, trying to, like, beat around the bush. But in a sense, like, what the U.S. is doing is not okay. And we are funding genocide. We are giving Israel the power that they have currently over these other countries and states, and it's sad. It's disheartening, and honestly, right now, I wish Harris was doing more about it and speaking up more about it. And there's this one TikTok I saw of Harris. There was a clip of her cutting off people speaking at her rally, saying, like, stop funding genocide, or like free Gaza. And she told them, like, I'm talking, stop, like, was like, I'm speaking now. And I'm just like, why would you even do that? Like, they're clearly here to make a point, and you're stopping their protest. Like, you should talk to them. Maybe actually have a conversation with them. That's, like, one thing about her political ideologies, I would say. And again, like, it's easy for us to say stuff and not actually know how it works. Like, we're not the president. We don't know the pressure of being a president or a vice president and how it actually works behind the scenes. So I think there's more to it. And it is very easy to say, like, stop funding them. But again, like, we need to do more. There's more that we could do. and they could at least tell us, and not keep us in the dark, sort of.
I just want to talk specifically about Donald Trump for a second, because I think that people who are supporting him are hearing these claims that if he's put back in office, he's going to be able to fix or end these wars that are happening in Israel and Gaza, or in Gaza, Israel, and then also Russia and Ukraine. I've heard many claims on the news from him and his supporters that, he's going to talk to them, or he's going to talk to these leaders, and he's going to be able to fix all these problems. And I just want to say that I know that these issues in these places have been long-standing and happened way before, or began, I would say, not the actual physical outbreak of war itself, but just the tensions and everything leading up to that began before Donald Trump was even in office. It's kind of been a long-standing thing, an issue. And if he were, because I know he's quote-unquote buddies with Vladimir Putin, or not really buddies, but he's made claims that he would be able to talk to Vladimir Putin and end the war in Russia and Ukraine, but at what cost? Because then Vladimir Putin's ideal way of ending that war would probably be to take over Ukraine and then move into somewhere else. And then it would basically be a whole world war outbreak again. So I just think that people need to pay attention also to what he's saying, because I don't think he can fix those issues by talking to a leader. I think his idea of fixing the issues is probably going to create even more violence. So,
what are your thoughts on climate change?
It's a thing. I think that many people, I'm not really too educated on climate change. I just know that it's a thing, and I don't follow the people who think it's not a thing. Because, clearly there are hurricanes happening, and clearly there are earthquakes happening in New York City now. And so we actually need to pay attention to it. We need to really dial in and, understand that there's things we can't control, and that is climate. So, we can control it. Not that we can't, because there are things we can do to stop the way the Earth is going. By recycling, that's one. And also not cutting down all these trees. There's also so many other things that we can do. Again, I'm not that educated on it. I should probably educate myself some more. But I do believe that it's a thing, and people should educate themselves as well.
I think that it's important to work towards more renewable energy sources, and that it is a big and serious issue that we have to take seriously. And even if we start now, it's still going to be really hard to make a big difference, but it's really important. So I think climate change is a really serious, important issue that we need to stop overlooking, and as much as we can to work towards renewable energy sources. And even for those who don't believe in climate change, why not improve our air quality and work towards better solutions? It's better for everyone's health, even if people don't believe that climate change is real.
Whoever is president should not deny that climate change exists. I think that one of the major policies that needs to be formulated and put in place would hold major corporations accountable for their environmental impact. Whether that is through taxing on people or corporations that have a major negative impact on the environment, or just holding some sort of standard.
I mentioned that climate change is a real thing, as we all see. And one thing I have been noticing, though, is a lot of these vehicle companies, I know Ford, Jeep, they have been coming out with a lot of electric vehicles, which I think we need to switch to. A lot of these burning of the fossil fuels, things like gas, it really does harm the environment. And we need to do something fast, because I believe it's near 14th Street. I think Union Square, there's a clock where it's until the effects of global warming are irreversible. So that clock is ticking. I think now it might be at 5 years. So the clock is ticking, right? And we all see it anybody that says climate change is not real, they just have to look at the numbers, because I know as long as I've been here, at least in New York City, October is right around now. We're at 50s, getting their snow, and now we're in the 70s. And as you can see, you know, with the hurricanes, the storms are getting stronger than we ever seen. Flooding, too frequent. So that's my take on climate change.
How did you formulate your political ideology?
My ideology, my beliefs, my everything, my life, me, has formed from my experience. And without it, I wouldn't be who I am and who I will become. So, yeah, my life.
For me, I think it started with my family and the values that they instilled in me. But as I get older, I do lots more research on my own and sometimes have differing opinions on certain things. But for me, it's just I go from like my main value of compassion and trying to help other people, and everything else kind of comes with that.
Personally, my beliefs, my political opinions, they have come from my educational experiences, through my conversations with people who have varying backgrounds than I do, and just from learning on my own. I think it's really important for Gen Z to not rely on social media for our news.
Life experience is definitely something that shaped my political ideologies. I also think probably more so than the average Gen Z person, I think I consume more news. And I try to look for unbiased sources. It's really hard in media nowadays, but I always was interested in like journalism, so that kind of was something that I think pulled me towards that, probably more so than like the average Gen Z voter. And then, I mean, I know people don't want to say it because like nobody wants to be manipulated by their parents, but I do think my family, to be honest, has influenced my political perspective. But it's also kind of a complicated thing because like my parents were never really as political as they are now, because I think that the times have changed, and I think that the things at stake are way more impactful. And so I think family, media, and just life experience.
I think that, of course, when you're younger, everything that your parents teach you, your family teaches you, kind of has an impact on how you think for the rest of your life. But I also think that a lot of my opinions have changed from just talking to people every day, my peers, my family, even just random people that I just meet. I think that it's really important to have an open mind, and I think that it's really important to, like AG said, have your own experiences, but also be open-minded to other people's experiences as well, because each individual person has their own individual experiences, and that, of course, is going to shape your mindset and the way that you think, whether that be politically or just in general. So I think that speaking to different people every day and having their experiences in your mind can also alter the way that you think as well.
Early on, it was definitely my mom, my family that persuaded me, but, having an open mind and looking at other people's experiences and then combining it with my own experiences and just putting myself in their shoes allowed me to just expand and have a broader perspective. So,
Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules